But if I want to get really good, if I want to keep on getting good over the long term, I want to make you as good as you can be so that I've got better quality sparring partners. Hey there, I'm Stefan Kesting, and this is the Strenuous Life Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thinking of going with this music, but my guest, Sean McHugh, who I've known for 16 years, just called it my porn music. So no, we're going to cancel the music. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
I'm excellent, Stefan. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. So we've known each other for 16 years. We used to train together back in the day. This is before you packed up, took your wife, took your gi, sold your apartment and moved out to wine country.
Yes, sir.
How are you finding the shift? I mean, you did that a bunch of years ago, but you were a city boy for a long time, and now you're an Okanagan boy.
Yes. Well, just to give a little recap of what the Okanagan is to other people that might not know where Kelowna or the Okanagan is, it's about 4 hours east of Vancouver. And fun fact, it is Canada's only semi-arid desert area. So it is bone dry here in the summer, hot as hell. So all our American friends who think when you cross the border, it's Narnia and it's all snow, it is sweating Vegas hot. Maybe not Vegas summer hot, but Vegas October hot in the summertime here. And also you're surrounded by about 150 wineries. So if you like wine and you like jiu-jitsu, come roll with me and we'll go for some tastings.
It's funny, when I, back in the day, was going through fire academy to become a firefighter, I went to Arkansas, and none of the instructors there had ever been in Canada. They basically had no idea where Canada, well, they knew Canada was somewhere up to the north. But when we say stuff like, I don't think this tactic would ever work because the engines that we have to tow by dog sled just would never be able to carry this much water. They were pretty sure that we were kidding, but not really sure. I mean, maybe they really do have dog sleds up there all year long,
yes,
even in the big cities. So you have regular fire engines in Kelowna.
Regular fire engines. We have lots of fires in the summer. It was pretty bad last summer, but
yeah, you were ground zero for it.
Yeah, and fires from the States were actually smogging up out here. There's so much smoke and it just can float on. So someone's problem can be your problem too, So That's why we got to help each other out with that.
A lot of our California friends went through the exact same thing.
Yeah, California got it really bad the last few years.
I remember trying to do cardio in the summer when the smoke settled in over Vancouver. And as you're going, first of all, you can't go as hard. And secondly, you're doubting yourself. Should I even be going hard?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a terrible idea to be.
It is a terrible idea. We had it so bad, it actually felt like you were in a dome a few times. It was like bright yellow, and it was like the smoke was above us, but not with us kind of thing. It's hard to explain if you never saw it, but it was like total Star Trek. It was weird. Only a few days were like that, but yeah, definitely could have done without the smoke this year or every year.
And Kelowna, being a semi-arid desert, fits pretty nicely with just about every planet that the original Star Trek episode people ever visited, because it always strangely looked like California.
Yeah, definitely. If they want to keep it going, come out here. We'd love to have more Star Treks going on.
So we started training jiu-jitsu in a very different era.
Yes.
From the jiu-jitsu of today.
Yes.
So
yes.
Why don't you just take us through, what was your first experience of jiu-jitsu back in the day, and why on earth would you have done it? Because it was different. It was a very niche thing, and I think people who signed up for jiu-jitsu pretty much thought that they were signing up to fight in the next UFC.
Yeah, definitely. I'm 45 years old, so I was a huge, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris fan. I grew up in that era. I knew who Jackie Chan was like in 81. Any movie I could find once, the VHS tapes came out, I was finding it. So, I did karate, like a lot of the guys our era. I did karate in grade 6. I started kickboxing in grade 8. Grade 10, I wrestled competitively, provincial level. And then I just focused on weightlifting. And then after I saw the first UFC, just like a million other guys, I'm like, I got to learn this jiu-jitsu. I'm like, what the hell is that, right? Even when I wrestled in high school, I hung around a bit of a tough crew in junior high and hit in high school. There a lot of fights would happen, and I realized you had to learn how to fight on the ground. We had a buddy move to town, and he had a wrestling background. And he just, play fighting mode through all of us. And that's what got me into wrestling.
Been doing karate and kickboxing and probably thought you were pretty tough.
Yeah. I remember being doing karate, thinking I was really good. And a friend was boxing and he just destroyed me. So that was the early wake ups. And then, after I saw the first UFC, I'm like, I got to learn this, man. And then this is like probably mid 90s, late 90s when I was seriously looking. There was no one to train with because there was no real instructors. All of a sudden, all these traditional martial arts schools were saying they're teaching grappling. But, with me with no experience, I go to a school and I'm like, man, you don't know nothing. And I knew nothing. So if I know you're teaching crap, you must have sucked.
It was amazing how once the UFC really brought that to the forefront, how all of a sudden every karate school discovered that fifth move and the fourth kata was actually a wrist lock. Well, that's kind of a grappling thing. Therefore, we teach grappling.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was pretty bad. My first instructor, who's an awesome martial artist, Victor Arbera, he was a white belt. He trained with Megaton Diaz, was like the first, as far as, unless I'm wrong, was the first black belt to kind of move to Vancouver, but he only stayed 6 months because it was too wet. So Vancouver rains a lot like Seattle. So it's a pretty wet city, an awesome city, but it does rain. And then Megaton moved out. So Vic only had 6 months of experience. Now, he could take 6 months of experience compared to most people and make it great. And that's what he did. He was a awesome martial artist. He was in incredible shape. And that was something you didn't talk a lot about, like the conditioning side of it. So I was training under Vic, and then that's where all my knee injuries started happening, not from jiu-jitsu, but from all my powerlifting and Olympic lifting. The 90s, no pain, no gain. We're lifting wrong eras, the way we wrapped our knees in powerlifting was all bad, so I was.
Oh, really? I've never heard that before. I mean, there's raw and then there's assisted powerlifting, right? Where raw, you just basically got to go in without any of this wraps.
Yeah, no, it was kind of like crossing the knee wraps over your knees so your knees couldn't move, and it wasn't like a good thing when you're trying to squat with a big, heavy amount of weight.
Essentially form a spring, so when you bend your leg, it straightens your leg for you, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, and and I just think my body was just kind of prone to injury as well. But so as I started training with Vic, I started getting these knee injuries kept coming up. Again, not from the jiu-jitsu. It was just I could walk and say hello, and my knee would go. And got healed up. That's when you started seeing what like the early politics in jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean?
You're training with that guy, you can't train with me.
Yeah, that, and a lot of, it's funny. It's like, check the ego at the door, but a lot of instructors have mass amounts of ego. So I'm not going to be here going on names and stuff, but Vic got sick of it because he was a traditional kickboxer. He was actually a black belt under Bill Superfoot Wallace as well. And so he's like, you know what? I'm sick of the politics of jiu-jitsu. I'm going to focus on kickboxing. And so when I was healing from my last knee surgery, that's when I met you, and I came to the Marcosaurus Club, and I walked in the door, saw you, Dennis Kang, Adam, Vlado. So I saw purple belts. I was a white belt. You guys were purple belts, and it was like seeing unicorns because like a blue belt was a big thing back in the day, and being purple belts, I'm like, good God, I'm in heaven here.
Well, I remember when blue belts were a big giant deal.
Yeah.
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And if it's a particularly conscientious and hardworking blue belt or purple belt, you still have a lot of knowledge that people don't have. So can you learn from a blue belt? Absolutely. Can you learn from a purple belt? Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was quite the time, going in back then. And like you said, jiu-jitsu was like an MMA fight. Like we were just a fight team. My first day almost got my shoulder dislocated as a beginner, by an advanced guy because he was getting mad because he was going for like a side Kimura and I was holding my belt and he had a hard time breaking my grip. And when he finally did, he just reefed it. I even screamed out loud where the class stopped and it was just like, did your arm come out? Oh, whatever. Walks away. And that's the way, it was. So,
I know who you're referring to. And, so he's a stellar guy.
He is a stellar guy. I will keep his name to us, but
to say that there's some people out there who just always seem to be at the center of an injury.
Yeah.
But there's some people who hurt beginners, and there's some people who are great with beginners, but as soon as it turns into a competitive match, man, there's no holds barred. And if they get something, they're going to crank it.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
I mean, obviously that wasn't great for the growth of the sport and the art, right? So a lot of people like myself, you, and others really wanted to learn. So we put up with, we dealt with that kind of stuff. We dealt with like our coach would move locations quite a bit. And I don't mean like around the corner. It could be like the other side of the city, So we'd follow wherever you went, right? Because
with zero notice.
Yeah.
You'd show up and the doors would be closed.
Yeah. Because, back then in the whole lower mainland, so that's more than Vancouver, Burnaby, Surrey, New West, everywhere, there was only like 2 schools, right? So there wasn't a lot of options. So as everything grew, guys, again, like you, me, and, a lot of others realized we got to change how we approach. So we would help new people. We would roll nicer with new people. It wasn't like making sure they knew their place once, you were more advanced, right? So, like you were a big influence in my learning because you helped me a ton because you would take that time to help me, right? Rather than being afraid, oh man, Sean might learn and then he might tap me out or he might get an advantage on me and I don't want to give him that, right? So,
which is stupid.
It is.
I don't think what I did was stupid.
No.
But if I want to salve my ego in the short term, then I don't show you anything.
Yes.
I make sure that I preserve that initial advantage for as long as I can. But if I want to get really good, if I want to keep on getting good over the long term, I want to make you as good as you can be so that I've got better quality sparring partners. I'll show you my trick and you'll develop a counter to my trick. And then I've got to develop a counter to the trick, or I got to develop a better setup, or I just have to get better at doing the move that I initially wanted to do. A lot of the world champions out there, what their best moves are.
Yeah.
It's not a big surprise that Keenan Cornelius is going to invert and try and wrap you up with his lapel, or wrap you up with your own lapel, rather.
Yeah.
It's not a big surprise when Bernardo Faria does the over-under past you. Try and stop him.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's just, is the passing of knowledge. And, like my school, I was always like that. I always would tell my guys, I'm like, I want you to be 10 times better than I was. And I get excited when we get, we've had some good experienced guys move to town and I treat them at my level. I'm like, you've got stuff I don't know, and I have stuff you don't know. And let's just put it all in the pot and we're going to make, the best jiu-jitsu stew anyone's ever had, So it's just keep sharing that information. I even do with other schools. Like if I've been with, seminars, I always help anyone who has a question. I'm not going to show you something you might do to my guy or that, I'm like, screw that. I'm here to pass knowledge. That's my job as an instructor. I'm here to pass knowledge 100%. So I just do my best at that.
Well, it's funny how knowledge used to be really, really hoarded back in the day because one guy might have gone and done a private with might have driven to Seattle to do a private with Marcelo Alonso. I think he was in Seattle.
Yeah, I think he still is. Yeah.
Oh, he still is.
Yeah.
He was kind of the first black belt, I think, within sort of a 4, 5, 6 hour radius.
Of Vancouver.
And you'd go and you'd learn a couple of techniques and then you'd come back, but you wouldn't show anybody.
Yeah.
And then maybe you would kind of hint. I mean, I didn't do this, but guys would.
Yeah.
Or even guys would, pony up the money to buy the new instructional, the VHS instructional, the 18 VHS set from Panther Productions or something, or World Martial Arts.
Yeah. 1 hour of just showing how to do an armbar from 15 different angles.
Yeah, exactly. And now we show again with more detail.
Yeah.
I actually remember one video. This is a capoeira video. I think it was from Panther Productions where they showed, I think, 7 or 8 capoeira techniques. Because at the time I was really into capoeira. They'd show them. Each technique they would show once at full speed. The guy would break it down and then they'd show it slow motion 3 or 4 times just to pad it.
Yeah.
And so then that filled up about 35 minutes of tape. And then the guy goes, okay, now we review again.
Yeah.
And they showed the entire first half of the tape a second time. So
got 2 moves every hour, right?
Yeah. And now I think to some extent, YouTube has blown this up completely. Because you can not show your students anything, but they're going to be out there. They're going to be getting the knowledge. So then it's kind of your job, given that they're getting knowledge, how do you contextualize it for them? And how do you maybe try and convince a white belt, 1 stripe, that he shouldn't maybe be working on the worm guard until he has a half guard?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is there's so much information, but it's sifting through what's the right information. So there's really good technique and there's still a lot of bad technique, right? Again, I'm not here to slam people, but we'll just say you'll know who I'm talking about. A famous lower mainland, island guy with his YouTube channel. And he was just showing a ton of bad stuff, wearing a Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt, but talking Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And, so it's just like, what is good, what is bad, right? And then also, what are you ready for? Because, we get it in kickboxing as well. It's like, oh, I want to do, a spinning back fist. I'm like, you don't know how to jab with keeping your hands up, right? Like, let's focus on the basics. Get your base, then add to it. But, it's just like building a house. Unless you got your base, it's going to come crumbling down, It's focus on the basics.
So you run a school. What's your approach to teaching beginners? Somebody walks in through the door. Mm-hmm. They have maybe watched a UFC or two, but they've never trained.
Yep.
So I want to start jiu-jitsu. What do you teach me first?
I go through in my basics program. Just a quick note from my school, because there is a bit of a change going on. So I'm just now progressively joining Alliance now. So I'm pretty excited about that. And they have everything set up, especially with training. So what they call Module 1 is their beginners. So they have it all set up. This is how you should teach. So I am just starting this program. It was a learning curve for me, because again, like we said earlier, where we came from, it was just one class. So it would just be hot, crazy warm up, some technique, and then fight for your life for an hour and a half. So when I moved to Kelowna, I still had a really hard warm up, and I only had one class. I didn't have beginners, intermediates, and advanced like I have now. So now that you smartened it up, there's beginners where you've got to go like through a light warm up, because even a fit person isn't fit for jiu-jitsu. Just like a jiu-jitsu guy isn't fit for a kickboxing workout if he's not ready for it, right? And vice versa. So I do a light warm-up, and I go through a lot of basic techniques, learning to break fall first, understanding what leverage is. I won't even show chokes for a while for a brand new person, because some people are super uncomfortable. First, you got to get them comfortable being in such close proximities, but putting your arm around someone's neck to me, it's a daily thing. Like I can almost go unconscious, and I do that 3-4 times a day getting wrestling, because I do all my classes. But someone who's never trained, we forget they're not used to this. They're not used to being so close. They're not used to being choked.
Jump in between my legs and
and just being choked, like going again, I could go 90%, 95% before I'll tap, because I've been there so many times. When I first started, a little choke, I'm like tap 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 tap. Oh my God, that was crazy, And then as you get more experience, how well your body does. Same thing like an armbar. Before it was even extended, I'd be tapping like crazy because I was so scared of it being hyperextended. But then I knew how far my body can go, and when I'm in danger, when I'm not. I'm not a stupid person where I put myself in danger. Accidents can happen, but I'll tap out when it's safe. But like from my early days, I just know my body better, right? So and the experience on the mat. But a new person, you got to go really, really soft on them to let them build it up. Now, some people are strong-minded than others. I'll have guys that they don't roll for 3 to 6 months, and I have other ones after 2 months, I'll let them roll a bit because they've got that mental strength. They're getting it quicker, So I kind of change it for each type of person. So I'll we'll just maybe do some positional, like try to fight out of the guard. That's the closest to rolling you'll get, or try to fight out of mount. That's with no submission attempts with the guy on top, and that'll be it. And then other guys, after a month, I can tell they got that mental fortitude. I'm like, we'll put it a little harder on them, not killing them, but just put a little more resistance, right? They're ready for it.
Do you ever get people who just really, really, really want to fight? I guess maybe they've got a little bit of background in some other martial art, or they've gone and done the research?
Yeah, I have. And, they're the ones that don't stay. We again, when I was just in Atlanta training with the Alliance team and, kind of finding how they do in their systems. And we talked about a lot of stuff like that. And it reminded me, like I've had new guys come in and they're like, oh, I've done this, or I think I can handle myself right now on the street type thing. Oh, okay, let's, wrestle around with me. I don't even do submissions. I'm just moving. They're out of breath in a couple of minutes. They're dying. And then I didn't even submit them or put head pressure. I wasn't even hard on them.
No neon face.
Yeah. And then after they're looking at you going with a look of shock, like you controlled me like I was nothing, and you're not even breathing hard, and I feel like I'm going to throw up. And I'm like, because I've done this a long time, and to me, wouldn't this be your eye opener, realizing how great jiu-jitsu is? But they let the ego, they just got crushed, realizing someone can control them like a child in a sense. And,
right.
And there's nothing they could do about it. So then their ego's crushed. They never come back. And again, that's why I don't really let certain people roll. Even, everybody, when they first start, or they're not rolling for at least a month or 2 months.
I think there's a lot of logic there, and I see why schools do it. But I think back to when I started, I think if there had been 2 schools and one of them I could have rolled at right away, and the other I was like, no, we're just going to wait a month and maybe 2. I think I probably would have gone with the one where you can roll right away.
Yeah.
But I think I also had a considerable amount of martial arts experience by the time I came around to formal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training. So that would have driven me crazy.
Yeah. Well, you had the mental fortitude for it, where, yes, that school that let the rolling happen would have gotten you, which would have been fantastic.
But it would have driven away 10 other guys.
It would have driven away 10 other guys. So there are people, I mean, they come in and, I hope they don't take it the wrong way. They're listening to this and they're a little soft, but you can build them up. Like I've had people like low self-esteem. They lost a bunch of weight. Now they're walking with their head high. Now they can roll harder. But if I did that right away, forget about it. They would have quit.
So you're almost teaching the people who don't need to be taught.
Yeah.
Or you'd be selecting for people who are not going to benefit the most from the martial arts training.
Yeah. And that's where it's like you got to have your levels. Like I used to call it, beginners, fundamental 1, intermediate, fundamental 2s, then advanced. So now that I'm being part of the Alliance program, we call it module 1, module 2, and then advanced. And then we're coming out with the competitors program as well. So it's very, again, it's worked. I mean, with Alliance, it's worked. Obviously, Marcelo Garcia and Lucas Lepre and Cobrita and everyone else that's has come out of their army of killers. So I'm like, I'm not going to question you. I think you know what you're talking about. And also like being with I was watching Fabio Ugel in 90. When did he fight Mark Kerr at 96? Barefisted, 190 versus 280. Or
Mark Kerr was just the most scary individual that had ever stepped foot inside an octagon or a ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you watch any of the? Well, you watched Smashing Machine, obviously.
Oh yes.
Just set the stage a bit because people might not know who Mark Kerr is.
So if you don't know who Mark Kerr is, think of all the old school MMA guys would know him. Mark Kerr was fought in the UFC. He was a bigger name in Pride in Japan. He was a big wrestler, and then Mark Coleman got him into MMA. And he was destroying people, but he was like juiced to the gills. Like if you shook his hand, you probably put 10 pounds on, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. But also he has a very addictive personality. So through this and with the punishment and the training's really changed from the early days of MMA to now where they're a lot smarter. We learned a lot more about concussions and recuperation. And, back there it was like, kick the shit out. The training sessions were fight. And then everyone's hurt. And then especially, you got a concussion in spar and just, okay, you're good. Let's spar some more. It's not very smart for a long, healthy life. But Mark had a lot of addiction issues with like painkillers, which you're seeing and almost an epidemic, I think, which is not talked about in mixed martial arts. And
I think wasn't it
Oxycontin? And he was shooting stuff up, other opiates, and then cocaine, drinking. And just watching that, and there was a recent video I just watched, Mark Kerr just talking about a couple of years ago, because he's like a car salesman now and just trying to...
Is that where he ends up at the car dealership?
Yeah. And he was
talking about how he still has a whole bunch of stuff he'd want to show from all his fighting years.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking because he is like the nicest person. He's so soft-spoken and I appreciate his honesty because other people would be like, I wouldn't want to share this, but him sharing what he's gone through hopefully will help someone who else might be going through it. So I applaud him. I really respect him. I just hope he's got his life together. My family has a lot of addiction issues in it, so I know the problems and the how it takes its toll on a family. So I'm hoping the best for him because again, I've never met him personally, but he seems like the nicest guy in the world, and I hope him just being honest and forthright will help somebody else.
I think part of it are coming from a family where there's a lot of ancestors of mine who drank themselves into the grave.
Yeah.
And knowing that I've got an extremely addictive personality, I mean, you should see me around chocolate, that I limit myself pretty much to so-called positive addictions. So jiu-jitsu, exercise, the occasional chocolate.
Yeah.
And then, the occasional transcontinental solo canoe trip or something. It's served me well. Yeah, Mark Kerr, that Smashing Machine movie, and then the recent one, I saw that as well. And you're right, it is heartbreaking, but maybe it will help. And I do agree that there are a ton of fighters out there, especially MMA guys, but probably jiu-jitsu guys as well.
Yeah.
In addition to trying to juice their way around the testing procedures, they're also doing a ton of pain management with things like Oxy.
Yeah.
They end up addicted, especially at the end of their careers, right? Where they maybe haven't developed skills that they can use in the rest of their lives because there really is a limited application to having a killer armbar and a fantastic Superman jab. You can't even go into security guarding. If you do that on the first shoplifter that you get, you're going to get charged and you're going to lose your security guard job.
Yeah. Unless you're being a trainer or something or opening a gym or focusing on training athletes. Yeah. It's a crazy life. Like I applaud them, anyone doing what they love, and that's awesome because it can open other doors. And if you're smart about it, but you always got to remember there's going to be a time it has to end, and you got to make sure you're prepared for it. And just like every other professional athlete and, football, you name it. I think the average is, I saw a stat, it was like after 6 years of getting out of the NFL, like over 50% go bankrupt. Yeah. So it's just not that proper training. Like, this is going to end. You got to figure something else out. The money's going to stop, especially if you're making the big money, right? And you don't come from money.
And then there's that super scary phase where a fighter might not be winning as much, where they've gone from winning 80% of their fights to maybe only winning 30% of their fights. But where else are they going to make $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in an afternoon of fighting? So they've maybe got a whole bunch of residual injuries built up.
Yeah.
They don't have the drive to keep on training.
No, their bodies just can't do it, right?
Their body can't do it, and maybe they're just tired of the whole thing. They're burnt out, but they still go back into the ring. Now they're going into the ring. They haven't trained. They're not sharp.
Yeah.
They take another beating, and all the while, brain trauma is adding up.
Yeah.
CTE gets a bit worse. That's associated with depression and instability and inability to control yourself. And none of those things are good for, moving on to the next phase of your career. It's really scary.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard to say. Everyone thinks it's not going to end, but I even think I was just reading something the other day, was like Chuck Liddell saying, with the right thing, I'd come back. And it's like, no, don't.
Dude, you got knocked out in one of your last fights, maybe your last fight, by a guy with a broken arm.
Yeah. Yeah. When Franklin knocked him out there. Yeah. When his arm broke.
Yeah. Well, his arm broke first, and then he knocked him out with a broken arm.
Yeah.
And it's not that he isn't tough.
No.
It's after, there are boxers out there who had an iron jaw at the start of their career. They could take a beating, and their strategy might have been to go in, take one and give one, take one and give one. I've got an iron head. But that iron head goes away.
Yeah.
And eventually, those guys, they can't spar at all.
No.
They get hit in the head with a little jab.
And they drop.
And they've got a headache for days, right? Or they drop.
Yeah. Did you see the Hurting Machine documentary? Sorry, not the Hurting Machine, the Hurt Business. It's on, I don't know if it's still on Netflix. It was, but you see a whole bunch of different fighters, but it had Gary Goodridge. Now, if you don't know Gary Goodridge, Gary Goodridge was another MMA pioneer from Canada. He was, was it UFC 7? I think he came out. He came in and got some like Kuk Sul Wan guy to sell him a black belt, to say he was a black belt in that art, which he wasn't. And anyway, but he's a big man, big tough man. And had some big fights in the UFC, and then he got into K1, and he got into Pride in Japan.
And basically became the gatekeeper. If you could beat Gary Goodridge,
you became somebody.
Then you could go on and fight their A-list fighters.
Yeah, but he did actually pretty good. Like, I never thought his striking was that good, but he was like Chris Lieben, all these other guys with iron heads who would just let people. He would let guys like top K1 guys punch him in the face, and he would laugh at them. So back then that was scary. You're like, Jesus, look at this guy. But now Gary Goodridge now is a mess. He forgets things. He can go into rages. And this is him talking about it. He can't move very well. He's slurred his speech.
He takes a whole bunch of Alzheimer's medications every day.
And it's like, and he is an old man. He is like 45, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's like 45. And I'm like, man, you got a lot of life left. You know what I mean? People think I'm 45. I never thought I'd be this old. I thought it was a joke when I was young. I'm like, you're old, you're stupid. I'm young, I'm smart. And then I blink my eyes, I'm 45 years old with tennis elbow, and a lot of pain, but it's all good. You just got to be smart with it. Well,
let's talk a little bit about I realize something I've never talked about in this podcast are ACL injuries, and they are fairly common in jiu-jitsu and in judo, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
I've, not finding lots of wood to knock on right now. I've never damaged my ACL. I've damaged other ligaments in the knee, but the ACL is a big one.
Yeah.
And you did both injure your ACL and then completely tear your ACL.
Yeah.
So just take us through the injury, how it happened,
mm-hmm.
what lesson could be learned, and then I'll pick your brain some more.
Yeah. Well, but again, I kind of always lifted weights. I started lifting weights at a young age, like dumbbells in grade 6. Made my own gym at home by grade 7. And then I paid for my own gym membership by grade 9. And guys that are if you're from the Lower Mainland, Surrey, Gators Gym, Gators Wear, well, give a shout out to Sergio, the former owner. That was one of the coolest weightlifting gyms I think ever. It was a hardcore weightlifting gym. I've seen 1,000-pound squat. I mean, a full squat. I've seen like a 6+ 100-pound bench, like crazy weights were there. But also in those times, the education for lifting wasn't what we know now. And I didn't warm up a lot. I didn't cool down a lot. How I progressed up to my heavy lifts, was I lifting too heavy? So I remember squatting and my leg just cracked and I'm like, whatever. And then I kept going. When I tore my, I had a hernia.
What would the Barbarian twins do?
Yeah, the Barbarian twins. I used to think they were the best too. When I had a hernia, same thing. I tore it in the gym and I felt the tear when I was doing dumbbell press. And I walk up to Sergio. I'm like, dude, you ever had this tear feeling? I didn't know what a hernia was, right? I'm only 21. And he's like, sounds like you have a hernia. And then bang, that popped out when I got home. I was like, should I keep lifting weights? And he's like, go home. If see how you feel. If it's bugging you tomorrow, maybe go to the doctor. And then, I realized I had a hernia. But then when I had my first knee injury, when I started jiu-jitsu, they said I had a meniscus tear, cartilage, and my ACL was partially torn. So they fixed all that. When the ACL is partially torn, they can't fix it. They have to let it completely tear type thing.
Isn't it pretty rare for ACLs to tear partially? I thought it was pretty binary, that most of the time it's either good or it tears.
Yeah. Again, to be honest, I was young, I'm barely listening to them. ACL, I'm like, how long till I'm on the mat? I'm not, I don't, it just wasn't, I wasn't the smartest of paying attention to what the doctors are saying and maybe doing research back then. But yeah, they said it was partially torn. And then I got my surgery. Rehab was pretty quick because it was just the cartilage meniscus. I was back training, and then I went to a tournament. And then back in the day, there was none of this IBJJF rules. Like, remember the Vancouver tournaments? It was like no slamming, no hitting, no biting. Okay, that's it. And maybe the referee knows jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? It could be a karate guy or a kung fu guy or another guy who has no idea what jiu-jitsu is because they just didn't even have guys that knew what reffing was. And so I hear I'm in a white belt match. White belts, like we're talking no stripe white belts, right? So he went for an ankle lock, and I didn't know the difference between an ankle lock and a heel hook. So I try to spin because I saw guys in videos spin, but those were heel hooks to escape it.
Right.
And I spun right into it and popped my own ACL, just like an idiot, or let's say uneducated jiu-jitsu guy way back then, right? And
I did that to someone once by accident.
Yeah,
not you.
No.
So now we know of a second example of where somebody who didn't know basically tries to spin out of an ankle lock, and that might be an entirely legitimate thing to do for a heel hook, but for an ankle lock, it's suicide.
I've jumped on people. I was watching guys roll, and then same thing. I saw a guy I could see the buildup. He's going to spin, and I actually literally jumped and yelled, stop. I'm like, like here's the old man example. This is what I did. Don't be me, man. And so I tore my ACL, and then I went to the doctor expecting, you'll be back in 2 months. And he's like, no, you'll be off for a year. I'm like, what? A year? And I'm like, no. Do you know who I am? I don't play that way. And he's like, no, dude, you're in bad shape, right? So I got my surgery done, and then I was doing rehab at the hospital. There was a gym in the hospital, and you can see my physiotherapist there. So it was funny because my first knee surgery, I didn't even take Tylenol. It didn't even hurt. Like, my buddy picked me up from the hospital, and we went for dinner. And I was like, I didn't even use crutches. I was walking. I was back bartending 2 weeks later. And but ACL, different story. I was holding my knee for 3 days. This is again 99. No, sorry, that ACL. Yeah, it was 99 or 2000.
So this wasn't arthroscopic then. This was like cut you open.
No, it was arthroscopic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it hurt like a mother. I was like 3 days holding my knee, and like I'm not big on taking the pain medication. I was popping that till I was falling over, and then I stopped taking it because I'm like I'm in pain and I'm high. So I just said
an excellent combination.
Yeah, an excellent combination to get it hurt. So I just threw it away and said, okay, more ice. But it hurt like bad. And again, it could have been the times, I don't know. But my physiotherapist, she was really good. But I was lucky because in the fitness area or the rehab area, she would check me out, and then here's my program to, do my physiotherapy exercises.
So what are the program? Like I've never torn my ACL. Okay. Again, knock on wood.
Well, everyone's different. And again, I'm talking from like, it was 17, 18 years ago. So a lot of it was like balance board, certain mobility, because you got to straighten your leg, because I got my hamstring as the new ligament. So I had to like learn, say you're lying on your bed, straightening your legs so the back of your knees straight down. Well, because after that surgery, your knee's bent. And if you don't keep pushing your knee down, it could be that way. You know what I mean? It'll stay that way. So there's a whole bunch of different exercises. But again, I'm a big burly powerlifter. There was no core. Never heard core, your strength and all this. Because when I was there was 2 Russian ladies. They were in their 50s, and they just came to Canada about 2 years prior.
This is at the hospital, not the gym.
This is at the hospital, yeah, in the fitness room. So they're the ones helping me with my program. And one lady, they didn't recognize their credentials, their education, which they're high educated in Russia, but it's just that stupid, hey, we got to make you go to school again type thing. And so one of them was going to do it. Another one's like, look, I'm retiring in 6 years. I'll just take the pay as the therapist in the fitness area. And so they were on me, and it was funny because I had to do like the balance board, how well you can stand on it. And they're like, you've got no strength. And I'm like, no strength. Again, you know who I am, you know what I lift. Mm-hmm. And so then she pushed me and almost fell over. You got no stability. And then I was on the balance board, and I could not even balance for a second. It was like smack on one side, smack on the other side, smack down. And but the girls, they were awesome because they put me through the paces. Also, they could realize I could take it because the fitness room was just full of whiners. I don't want to do this. Oh, it hurts. And my mindset was, this hurts, but I want to get back on the mats. Mm-hmm. I'm still a white belt. I want to train, right? And I was ahead, like I can't remember how many months ahead I finished with their help. I'll put an example this way. I had my surgery in October, and it was the beginning of November, and I was back to work. I worked at this really cool, the Morrissey, little bar down in Vancouver. I got paid to hang out the front and get hugged and drink a lot. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it was really busy. I had to start a lineup, and a group was coming in, and one girl was on crutches. So I pulled up a chair. I'm like, hey, take a seat. We'll get you in as soon as possible. And we started chatting. And I go, you had knee surgery? She's like, yeah. And then I go, what'd you have? And she's like, ACL surgery. Again, it's November. I had my surgery in October. And I go, when did you have your surgery? She goes, I had my surgery in September. And I go, I had ACL surgery. And she goes, when did you have your surgery? I go, October. And she's like, how the hell are you standing? And I'm like, I've been working already, man. Like, I just pushed myself in the fitness room so hard, but also with the help of those the ladies from Russia. They just no remorse for my pain. They pushed me through it, mm-hmm. and it hurt bad. But every time they're like, "Where are you in your fitness program?" I go, "I was done 15 minutes ago. I was waiting for you." And they were blown away that I had my head down and I did it. But I recovered really quick with it. So about just under a year, I was back on the mats again. But I was paranoid for like a year or 2 years of hurting my knee again.
Mm-hmm. Of course, understandably.
Yeah, the wind blew the wrong way. I was like, oh, my knee. Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to relax.
And that's totally reasonable for people coming back from an injury, mm-hmm. that they
baby it
are hyper paranoid about it. Because if you go full bore right away, the odds of hurting yourself are really, really, really high. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying anything that shouldn't be obvious, but it isn't obvious because both you and I have come back from injuries way too fast and way too hard and ended up injured again.
Yeah. So you kids, listen up. Listen to the old guys. They might know a thing or two.
One thing I wanted to pick your brain about, it's a question I got asked recently, is how do you improve recovery? Say you're training a couple times a week, and then you want to bump it up to, say, 3 or 4 times a week, and you also want to start doing some cardio, and you also want to start doing some weightlifting or conditioning. Obviously, that's more total strain on your system. So if you don't recover more, in addition to training more, you're going to end up injured. It's going to,
your body will break
every time
down.
You train, you get beaten up a little bit, and you'll overtrain, you'll break down.
Yeah.
So through the weightlifting that you've done, through the teaching, through having seen this with your students, what would be some of your top tips to people for recovering faster or recovering better if they're increasing the amount of training they're doing?
The bare bones basics is first doing proper training, and knowing your limits. Like, we've seen the explosion of CrossFit, which is good and bad. At CrossFit, there's fantastic instructors that know what they're doing, but when anything gets popular, a lot of people that aren't qualified jump in and they're looking for the quick buck, right? So mm-hmm. finding, first proper training. So if you're going to tone your training up, what is proper training? Is it, if you're kickboxing, is it kicking the shit out of your training partner in the ring, not wearing headgear? So it's finding the right instructors and the right training for you. So I think that's your bare bones basics. After that is nutrition and rest. So are you getting enough sleep? Mm-hmm. I'm a night bird. I've worked in the bar industry for 20 years. Even though I'm not in it anymore, I still have a hard time. Like, I got to force myself to go to bed early because to me, midnight isn't late, mm-hmm. but I get up at early, so it should be late, right? But I always take naps through the day. So that's why it kind of pans out a bit. But if you're training hard, you got to make sure you're getting lots of sleep. And then also after that is starting to get into preventative care. So a lot of us don't see a doctor or a physiotherapist until we're hurt. So, when I was training hard, when I was still in Vancouver, I was like chiropractor, massage therapist, acupuncturist, keeping me healthy. And when I was consistently going, and I don't mean every week, I always had good doctors. Like they're like, you don't need to see me. You're good right now. Come back in 6 weeks or 2 months, and then we'll do another session. Massage therapy a little more because, your muscles are always going to need it. But do that preventative care. It can get expensive if you don't have medical coverage, but you're investing in your body because believe me, once you get hurt, you wish you did. Especially if you're training for a competition or something coming up, and you're like, you didn't do as well in the competition, or heaven forbid you get hurt before it, and then all that training and time didn't. If you had that preventative care, you might have been all right. You might have not pulled a hamstring or something. Who knows? If the massage therapist caught it in time, or the acupuncturist was doing their thing to help keep you loose and stuff. So, and also learning to relax, because we think about it all the time, right? Training, you're thinking about jujitsu or kickboxing or whatever when you're not training. So it's like, go for a walk, listen to the birds, get some relaxing time.
What you just said brings up a couple of things. I know for myself, the sleep thing is huge. I mean, I'm super crazy busy. When we get off this, I've probably literally got 300 emails to go through from today. And I'm not going to bed till those emails are mostly answered. But then it's going to be late, and I'm getting up early tomorrow. Now, as soon as I go from, sort of maintenance training to harder training, or maintenance training and just regular weightlifting to doing heavy squats in weightlifting, boom, instantly I need an extra hour of sleep. I cannot burn the candle at both ends and train hard. And so I think a lot of people, using coffee and stimulants, Adderall or whatever it is that the kids are taking nowadays, they can get through the tiredness, and they might be able to function despite being tired, but their body still hasn't healed yet.
Yeah.
So I think really, and by rest, we mean rest, but we also mean sleep. I think there's unique properties to sleep that you don't get from just chilling on the couch and watching Netflix. The old Netflix and chill.
Yeah, the Netflix and chill
healing strategy. And I think if you can get naps in during the day, that's huge.
Yeah, even a half hour. Like I have a class at 11:30, depending on the class. Some finishes earlier, but the later ones I finish at 1. Got some club stuff to do, so I'll be home around just after 2. I'll eat right away, and I usually crash for about half an hour. And then I got to be back at the club at 3:30. So yeah, I just pass right out after. Just sleeping isn't a problem for me. It's something that's strong in our family. We like naps, but
I wish I had that ability to nap anywhere, anytime, on the bus, on the plane, behind the wheel of your car while you're driving. That's a superpower.
Except on the plane, I can never sleep on a plane. Yeah, no, I'll crash when everyone's bumping into you.
Are you a nervous flyer?
You know what? It's funny because I just did that trip and I got back from Atlanta. I have gotten as I gotten older. When I was younger, it never bothered me, but as I gotten older, I have gotten a bit of an anxiety flying a bit, but not uncontrollably. Or I don't drink. I usually don't have any alcohol or nothing when I'm on a plane. But I just I even from the start when I was younger, I just could never sleep. I might crash a bit, but then you're uncomfortable. I'll have a headache. I'm uncomfortable. My wife, she sits down, puts her little neck thing on. She's out, and I'm just like, why can't I be you?
I'm jealous of that. I don't think I might have slept on a plane for like half an hour going to Asia.
Taking off and landing, and that's it. Plane, that's the only time I'll fall asleep. Just, we're landing good. Coming down, taxiing, and then all of a sudden I crash. I'm like, why now?
I think another mistake people make when it comes to recovery is the nutrition component of it. I know certainly, most people will be able to train better and train harder and be smarter about it and not get injured as much if they have a half decent but small meal, an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours. I mean, individual results may vary. You have to experiment with this before training. Something, in my case, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of fat, an almond butter sandwich or something seems to be the perfect thing. But then right after training, if I don't eat fairly soon after training, I can keep on going. But then it's just the amount of time that it takes to recover from that training session. A bodybuilders are pretty good about this. Well, there's your what is it? Your androgenic window or whatever it's called. You got to eat something. You got to get a protein shake with 5 million grams of protein within 30 minutes of your exercise. But there's something to that. If you need to recover, then make sure that you're getting something with protein and something with carbs in that sort of half hour to 45-minute window, and hydration right after you finish training, or you won't be healed up and rested up for your next training session.
Yeah, or just enjoy the rest of the day. If you got I used to train, you remember our classes, they were 3 hours long sometimes, right? So, we'd have the hardest warm up, killer half hour, 50 push-ups, 50, mountain climbers, 50 jumps, 50, clapping push-ups, 50 this, and it was tough as nails. And then, drilling, same 50 knee on bellies, 50 spinning arm bars, 50, whatever technique. And then rolling could be, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then I would go work at the restaurants, right? And then I'd be at 5 till 1 a.m. I'm getting home at 2 and I have to chill out. Like I could never just go right to bed. I would have, some tea or something, or my younger years, I would have copious amounts of alcohol, but that wasn't good. And so, you got to make sure you're eating right away, whether, and if you've got a family, like you got your training done, you got some family stuff to do, whether it's spending time with the kids rather than passing out, or housework to get done. There's always usually something to do.
Well, people without kids and people without jobs, you didn't have a real job back in the day, and neither did I, because I was just doing just enough contract work as a biologist of all things to get by, pay the bills, and to pay for my training, pay for my rent, and then I'd basically just go train and play the rest of the time. So people without jobs and people without kids just have no idea of how much free time they have. I just want to say that. And the people with kids and with jobs out there are nodding their heads right now, and the young kids are going, "Well, come on, man, it can't be all that bad."
Well, and different life stresses, right? So everyone has their own life journey and the ups and downs of life, right? So those stress takes a huge toll on your life, not just training stress, but life stress. Like, do you have family problems? Is something this or this or this, and it takes a toll on you. So, that's why nutrition is really important. And your nutrition and your rest is so important, right? If you want to be competitive, and even if you want to just train hard 3 days a week, it's still important, right?
Well, I remember, I think it was Randy Couture fighting Brock Lesnar. And I'm a huge Randy Couture fan. One of my favorite fighters of all time, favorite human beings from afar of all time. I'd love to get him on the podcast. And when he fought Brock Lesnar, I believe, and I hope I'm right about this, that he had not one, but 2 or 3 different lawsuits going on at the time. I think he was going through divorce maybe, and that was one legal battle. And there was another legal battle, I think, about a charity he was involved in. And then there was another, like maybe UFC contract negotiations. In my mind, I was going, how on earth can you get ready for a fight when you're not having been through legal battles, steal my material or whatever, divorces or whatever? It's incredibly taxing. Now you're not going through one, you're going through 2 or 3 of these. How do you do a proper training camp? And that just speaks to the stress on top of the training stress.
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very difficult to do. I mean, sometimes the best you can do, if you're going through stuff like that, really the best you can do is just show up to class and come back the next day. And it's not going to be a time that you're going to make your biggest gains, but you're at least not going to fall too far behind. And sometimes when you're going through stuff like that, the goal becomes not falling too far behind as opposed to getting way, way, way better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just, it all takes its toll on you. So like I said, eating, rest, and trying to keep the stress out of your life. That's the biggest thing. Cause it's surprising watching like, the UFC and the bios and some of the fighters. And you're like, I think Joe Daddy Stevenson, who I was a big fan, I was watching him fight the little shows in the 90s. And then he was, doing really well in the UFC. And he was like 27 with 4 kids. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's incredibly impressive.
And then he opened a business and, other things. And I'm like, how do you even do that, man? So it's be definitely taxing on you. That's for sure.
And then you have people like him who just make a mockery of it all and manage to do it all and win consistently. at the highest level in the world. Thank you, Joe Stevenson. Have to get you on the podcast too to tell us how you did
he was having some hard times after, because he was just on the UFC show, reality show again, trying to make a comeback. And it was kind of that he got knocked out bad. He got hurt, lost a fight, and then someone else got hurt training, and they were going to bring him back. And even the other coach was going, man, he just got hurt, and the guy he's going to fight has heavy hands. Don't put him in the cage. And they did, and he got knocked the F out. And it's hard to see, because, you know, like I really like Joe Daddy Stevenson. Like I've watched, you know, again, I've watched him forever. Seems like a nice enough guy. You know what I mean? Again, I've never met him, but good, you know, good fighter, tough as nails. Yeah, he just got knocked out bad, and was and it was hurt. It's hurt to see. He's like 36 now.
And as Indiana Jones once said, it's not the years, it's the mileage, and that's
he was fighting at 16. He was fighting adults at 16 years old, right? So. Yeah, and again, the mileage, because the way they stop fights, the old fights, you know, fighting with a concussion, like I don't even think they were checking. Like you could get knocked out, you know, Friday, and you could be fighting 2 weeks later. Yeah, so now it's a little better, where you can't fight legally for 3 months unless you're scanned again.
Well, one day, hopefully, they'll have blood markers for, you know, knowing when a concussion is cleared and knowing for when it's safe to fight again. Have some slightly more objective measure than can you actually walk in a straight line. Yeah,
no, it's tough seeing fighters like that, and they're hurt, and they're only in their 30s, slurring their words, and then you don't hear about them anymore, and that's it. Like,
well, then they must be fine.
He's doing well. He's got tons of cash, and he's having a good time. No, he's probably in a shitty apartment, you know, and all his friends bailed on him. You know, it's not trying to be a downer, but like that happens all the time, right? You know,
nobody loves you when you're down and out. Well, on that super happy note. Well, I'm gonna cue the piano again. Oh, I'm not sure that's happy piano. I don't have very many music edition options here.
Yeah, I can't. There we go. I'll look for something for Christmas for you then.
But if people are passing through the Okanagan, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find you?
Well, we're kind of changing our brand over right now, but you can currently look up firststrikemartialarts.com and you'll get us. But we are changing over to Alliance, so we're going to be alliancekelowna.com. We're just getting that new website coming up, and all the other websites, once the full changeover, it'll just bounce to it. Give us a call. Our doors open for anybody from any club, as long as you got a good attitude and you want to have some fun and learn. We'd love to meet you.
I can vouch for that. You got a lot of great guys, not a bunch of
they don't usually like staying too long. You know, but yeah, we have a good group. Again, and my biggest thing was making an environment it's very welcoming, you know, so I wanted it for everybody, from beginner, out of shape guy to advanced. We know how to treat someone when they're starting, and you know, we want to go hard. We're going to go hard. You know, we have medal winners from the Pan Ams, from the Nagas, so we're doing well.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for taking the time, Sean.
Thank you, Stefan. Always a pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon. Podcast listeners, if you found this interesting or useful or entertaining, please pass this episode on to somebody else in your social circle or in your training circle. Surely there's somebody else out there who would also find it interesting. This is the way the podcast grows. It's an organic growth by people like you passing it on to their friends and the people that they know. I really, really appreciate this kind of sharing. So thank you so much in advance, and good luck with your training.